Hey guys, what's going on? So in today's video, I'm going to show you very quickly how you can protect your Linux server and set up a firewall. And to do that today, we're going to use something called UFW, also known as uncomplicated firewall. So the first thing you're going to do is go ahead and open up a Linux server. So I've got a Raspberry Pi Zero here that I'm going to be using to do all my demo on. I've also got a Windows virtual machine open on the side here as well, and I'm going to bring up the command prompt. And I'll show you exactly why I have a separate command prompt for Windows. And that's when I'm going to be adding one of my rules. I'm actually going to be blocking one of these IP addresses. And it's to show you, in fact, that the IP address does get blocked. But there's a trick to it. So let's get started. First and foremost, you're going to go ahead and install uncomplicated firewall. So it's sudo apt install UFW. Now I've already got it installed on here. So it's going to show that it's saying it's already the newest version. But for you, it'll go ahead and install it. Once you do that, you're going to have to go ahead and enable it. So you're going to type in sudo UFW enable. And for me, it should already be enabled as well. And so you're just going to hit yes. So firewall is active and enabled on your system at startup. So it was already enabled on mine. It just displays it anyways. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you're going to go ahead and open sudo UFW status. And that's going to show you what rules are already in your UFW. So what I have here is I actually have port 22 to allow from anywhere, and port 22 is my SSH port. That basically allows me to SSH into that Raspberry Pi. So whether you're sitting on DigitalOcean, AWS, or whatever it may be, the procedure is the same as long as it's a Linux server. So let's say right now this server only allows port 22 traffic in here, which means that it doesn't allow any HTTP traffic at this point. If I wanted to do that, it's very simple. I just go sudo UFW allow 80, and that just means that I'm going to go ahead and open up port 80. So it's going to say rule added. We're going to go ahead and show the status again, and you'll see that port 80 is added. Now if I wanted to remove this, it's very simple. Type in sudo UFW delete allow 80. That's one way to do it, or the simplest way to do it is just to count which rule it is, which is 1 2 3, and you just say sudo UFW delete 3, and that just means delete rule number 3, and it's going to say delete allow 80, and you say yes. Okay, so that's how you add and remove a specific port. Now let's go ahead and delete or block a specific IP address. Okay, so now before I actually SSH into the Linux server here as well, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and get the IP address for this. So we're going to type in ipconfig because this is a Windows machine. And you'll see my IP address is this, 192.168.1.50. Everything above is actually blanked out because that exposes my IP6 address and I don't want to give that away. But basically for my local address, this is the address we need to worry about. So it's basically .1.50. Okay, so now that we know that, let's go ahead and get rid of this screen. And so what I'm going to demonstrate is that I can in fact get into this. So I'm going to type in SSH pi at 192.168.1.252. Put in my password, and I probably put in the wrong password, which is why it's taking a second. So let's do that again. So I can SSH just fine into the Pi as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and clear this out. Now, because I'm in Linux, I can type in clear. So that basically shows that I can get in. So in order for me to block that IP address, I'm just going to type in sudo UFW deny from, and then 192.168.1.50. I add that in. It says rule added. So let's go back to status. And you'll see that the rule is right over here. And for whatever reason, this one, I forgot to delete the IP6 version. So we'll delete that in a second. So it's 1 2 3 4 5 6. That's rule number 6. So sudo UFW delete 6. Okay, so let's bring this back up. All right, so my rule is right here that this is going to deny this IP. So let's go ahead and log out of this. Okay, clear this out, and we're going to try SSHing into this. So it's asking me for a password. That's already a red flag, but I can get in. So what exactly happened here? The way UFW works, it actually reads top to bottom. So first it's going to look for the rule to say that anybody, it says anywhere, can go ahead and log into SSH. So in order for me to make this work, I need to put this rule up on the top, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's go ahead and exit this out, and let's go ahead and delete that rule as well. So sudo UFW delete 3, yes. Okay, so we're going to go ahead back to this rule that I said sudo UFW deny from, but I'm going to type in insert 1, and that means make it the first rule in the UFW command. So now it says rule is inserted. When I go ahead and look at the status, you'll see that now this is at the very top. So because this is going to read this top to bottom, I should not be able to get in now. So let's go ahead and SSH, and it's hanging for a sec. I'm actually just going to go ahead and open and close this all over again. So let's just close this down, terminal. Let's open it back up. So we're going to go ahead and do that SSH command again. It's gone, so we'll just do SSH pi at 192.168.1.252. So it says SSH to host, so port, so connection timed out. So what is exactly happening here? When we send a message from one server to the next, when I type in a deny rule, it's basically saying for that IP address, make it think that the port, it doesn't even exist. So what it's trying to do, it's pinging that port over and over again, and it's saying let me in, but there's nothing there for the specific IP address. So it returns a connection timed out. What if I actually wanted to return a message saying, hey, listen, the port exists, but I'm not going to give you access? Well, there's a different command for that one, and that's called reject. So let's go ahead and open up back our rules right now and see what we have. Now, what I want to do is show you two things. One is, before this, we actually showed a deny rule, and basically that deny rule was sudo ufw deny, and then from the IP address 192.168, and we saw what that did. That basically said connection refused. What if I actually want to send back a message to the person saying, hey, listen, this port is operational, but I just don't want you to have access to it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now put in a command here that I've already put that is going to not only reject that IP address from accessing the server, but on a specific port. So for example, if this is an SSH port, I want to basically put this rule on top to go ahead and reject this IP address, which is this server, to port 22. So let's go ahead and put that rule in. And so let's bring up the status. And now it basically says to port 22, reject from this IP address. Remember before it showed that the connection timed out. Well, in this case, I'm hoping that it shows a different message. And the message that I'm looking for is more along the lines of, you've been rejected from this port. So let's open this up. And it says connection refused. So remember before it said connection timed out. Now it's saying connection refused. And that basically tells the other side that the port's open, you just don't have access to it. It's also good practice that as you do some of these changes, you should always reload your firewall as well. So sudo ufw reload. Now, because this is a home server, a development server, I should say, I'm not super concerned about people coming in and out through different ports. But if you are using this as your production server anywhere, or even a development server on the cloud somewhere, I would always go ahead and make sure that you let a reverse proxy like Nginx, for example, do a lot of your routing. So a lot of the time, instead of having specific rules for specific ports, like I have here, what I would rather do is I would just type in sudo ufw allow, and then the profile name is called Nginx full. And once you add in something like this, basically all the reverse proxying is done by Nginx. You can do this with Apache as well. It's same scenario basically. But again, move this to the top. And that basically says let Nginx do all the routing that you want. Anything outside of those ports, I would actually close down. Now, if you are using this again as a development server and you're using something like Flask or Django, I would actually open up port 5000 because that's where the default ports are for. Flask is 5000, so sudo ufw allow 5000. And then I would do the same thing for Django, which is port 8000. And once you have this open, when you're doing your development testing at home, you shouldn't have a problem with a blocked proxy. But once you're done all of that, I would actually go ahead and remove all the rules other than SSH. But let your Nginx full do all of the routing in the background, just because it's a lot easier and it's contained and it's something you can control. And Nginx, like I said, will either send it to the right subdomain, depending on how you configure it, or to the right port, depending what mechanism you use to basically route your traffic. So hopefully this video helped some of you guys out there. I did get a lot of questions again on this, on how I would protect a server with some firewall functionality. Again, remember, having the firewall is just the first line of defense. It doesn't protect you from all threats, so you have to make sure that you do the proper pen testing against your server as well. So enjoy using UFW, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.